What is up? I'm Marcel and welcome back to The Modern Filmmaker. In this Davinci Resolve tutorial, we're going to look at how to match your drone footage to any cinema camera or DSLR. So most of the time I shoot with the Pocket 6K or even the 12K, but sometimes we also shoot with a drone. And while the drone footage usually ends up making up a small percentage of the actual video, it's very important that the drone footage ends up matching the footage that we're getting from the ground. And today I wanted to go over a few techniques that'll not only make your drone shots more cinematic, but will really help you match just about any camera to another camera. So this is the clip that we're going to be working with today, and I'll go ahead and leave a link to this clip and a few others in the description that you guys can download for free and just follow along and experiment. But one thing that I usually do is, if this was a short film or an episodic series or something like that, this shot would be an establishing shot to show where we are and who we're concentrating on. But right now, all it really shows is where we are. One thing the drone does is follow this car, but I want the viewer to actually know that this is the car and this person that the story is about is in the car, and we need to follow that car. So one thing I like to do with drone shots is add a little bit more movement with dynamic zoom. So if I go here to the edit tab, click on the clip, and then in the dynamic zoom, I can turn this on. And then by default, it'll be set up to do a slow pull out. And if I go over here to this drop down menu in the bottom left of the preview window, I can click this down and it'll give us a bunch of options, one of them being dynamic zoom. And if I click that and turn this on, we can see that the motion right now is to start in this green element and then to pull back to this red square back here. And this is actually a pretty popular trick. If I go ahead and play this back just as it is right now, it is actually a trick you've seen before. So this is the drone pushing forward, but we're doing a post zoom backwards, which gives us really cool warp effect. And you guys can use that in a lot of really cool ways. That's not what we're doing today, but that is a little pro tip. The dynamic zoom can be used for a lot of cool things, especially with push and pull motions, or to go against a push and pull motion to create some cool distortion in the perspective. So from here, we're actually going to swap this. So if I turn this back on, and then if I click the swap button in dynamic zoom, you'll see now the green's on the outside, the red's on the inside. This just lets us know that we're actually starting from the outside and we'll be pushing in. So from here, all I need to do is click on this red square and then move this down to more where it's in the center with my car. If I go back here to the last frame, this will kind of put this towards the center of where the car is. Now, if we play this back, it pushes in on the car, which kind of just pulls the story along. It's not just a great visual, but it also says like, hey, we're focusing on this car that's driving down the road and we're seeing where this person's going or what they're doing next. And then from here, we can go into the color tab and really make some magic happen. So from here, I'm going to hit Alt-S and make one more new node. And this is going to be where our color space transform is. And this tool you can use to almost turn any other camera to another camera. So if I click on the open effects and come down here to the color space, transform, wherever it is, I think it's actually at the top, boom. I can pull this in. And now you'll see a few options. Here at the top, it'll say input color space. And it's just asking me, what's the color space that your footage was shot in? As Davinci Resolve, or as this tool, the color space transform, it's saying, before I can turn this in to the kind of footage you want it to be, I need to know what kind of footage it is. And I need to know the color space and the gamma. And that would be the contrast information and the color information. And so if I come up here to the input color space, I can click the drop down menu and then come down here to the DJI D gamut, because I was shooting with the Mavic 2 Pro and it was in D-Log. Shooting in log is the best way to really make this work. So if you haven't gotten your shots yet and you're trying to do this, or you want to go on to do this in the future, make sure to always shoot in log, whether that be with your DSLR like I'm using here or with the drone. Try to shoot in log. It's the best way to match it to cinema cameras like the Blackmagic or Red or even ARRI. So from here, we'll go to input gamma and I'll click the drop down menu and then come down to the DJI D log. And if you were shooting, like let's say you were trying to transform your footage from, not from a drone, but from a Sony a7S or from the Panasonic GH5 like I'm using here, you come in here to your color space and just go to Panasonic V gamut if you're using a Panasonic, or the S gamut if you're using S-Log, and same thing for the input gamma. You come down to F-Log for Fuji or N-Log or V-Log. You have all the log options to input no matter what camera you're trying to come from, the options there. And this looks a little wild at the moment because right now we've told the color space transform what kind of footage this is, but we haven't told it what kind of footage we want it to be. So if we go to the output color space, we can click the drop down menu. And I usually shoot, again, like I said, with the Blackmagic cameras. So I'll come down to the newest Blackmagic Design Wide Gamut Gen 4/5. And then in the output gamma, I'll come down to the Blackmagic Design Film Gen 5. Because usually when I'm using my Blackmagic cameras, I always shoot in the Film Gen 5 profile. And again, if you were trying to make your drone look like a Canon or a Red or Ari, then you would come down to those appropriate options. As you see, there's Canon options here, there's Red options here, there's Ari options at the top. And from here, what I'm seeing is a very flat image, even flatter than when we started. If I close this and then click deactivate this node, you'll see that it was even less flat when we started, but that's because the Blackmagic Design Film Gen 5 is extremely flat. And the first time I did this, the first thing I thought was, oh wow, that looks a lot like what I'm used to seeing when I bring home footage from shoots from the 6K or the 12K. So this is pretty comforting to me. And if you're doing the same thing, but transforming your drone footage to Sony log or Canon log, you might notice right when you make the transformation originally, wow, this looks really familiar, which is cool. And then from here, we'll just need to add a LUT because it's pretty much like we're starting from scratch with Blackmagic Raw Film Gen 5. And we just need to kind of carry on from there. So in the next node, I'll right click and go down to LUTs. And I'm just going to go with the standard Blackmagic LUT. I don't have to use the Blackmagic LUT. I could use any LUT that I like to use with my Blackmagic cameras. But I actually like the standard Blackmagic LUT. So I'll come down here to the Gen 5 film to extended video. Now, right off the bat, this may not look perfect because Davinci Resolve can't just take footage from one camera and just magically make it perfectly footage from another camera. But this is super close, and it actually does look very similar to what I'm used to seeing when I bring home footage from my Blackmagic cameras and then put the LUT on. The Gen 5 film color science is very punchy, very saturated. So this does remind me of that, but there are a few adjustments I'd like to make. Now, for the color correction adjustments that I want to make, I'm going to do this before the color space transform, just so I know that I'm affecting the raw image that I pulled in, just giving me the most information to work with. So one thing I'm seeing is that the clouds are just way blown out, and I would like to bring those down. And one way I'm going to do this is in the primaries wheels, I'm going to come to the highlight dial and bring this down until I can see those clouds come back to life. And that looks pretty good. About right there. One thing I've noticed about the highlight wheel is in this particular image, it's made some of the highlights of these houses a little darker than I'd like to be. So I'm really just going to try to affect the sky here by making a gradient power window. So if I go to the power window section and then come down to the gradient and hit the highlight button to see what we're affecting, I'm going to pull this up to just the sky and those clouds, and then gradient this down quite a bit, and then hit off the highlight button, and voila. Now our neighborhood is nice and punchy, but our sky is back, and we can see our clouds again. And if I deactivate that node, activate, deactivate, activate, it looks nice. It definitely looks much more film-esque. It looks like we've extended the dynamic range of the drone, which we know doesn't have a great dynamic range, but there are things we can do to massage it to an okay dynamic range, or at least make it seem that way. And so one thing I'm going to add is a node in between the color space transform and the LUT. And here I'm going to make a few color adjustments. This green looks very neon to me. So I'm just going to go to the hue versus luminance, and I'm going to click on a green section that looks neon-ish, like this strip right here, and just click in here, and then it'll make a dot in our curves in our hue versus luminance, and I can just bring this down to give that green a little less punch, a little less brightness. Because while it's very green here in Franklin, Tennessee, it's not anywhere near as green as it just looked on the screen. And that looks a good bit better. And then one other thing I'm going to do is come to the color boost and just push this down slightly, maybe to 5.5. Boom. And now this looks a lot more even. Before, the grass was kind of all over the place. You had these dark spots and these light spots. You had these orange spots and the light green, the dark. It was just too much. With this, Control D to activate this node, we're seeing a much more even grass. And it just doesn't seem as distracting from what we're trying to look at, which is this car driving down the road, obviously going somewhere. A little secret, it was me. I was just going home. So now we can continue with some more elaborate effects. If I pull this back to our first frame, I want to make the sky pop just a little bit more. So if I hit Alt-S and then make another gradient window with the power windows, hit the gradient button, the highlight button just to make sure we've got just the sky. Boom. And I'll leave the highlight on and go to the qualifier, and I'll raise the luminance. I'll raise the low of the luminance and try to get just the highlights of the clouds. Let's see. Let's come up here. That looks good. And now I'll hit the L soft, the low soft. Boom. And not too soft, because I would like to just get the highlights of the clouds. I'd like to not get the shadows if possible. And then I'll go to the clean black and I'll slide this up just a little bit. That looks pretty good. And then I'll click off the highlight button, go to the primaries bars. So I'll click on the wheels, go to bars, and the gain, I'll bump this up a little here. Boom. Boom. 1.4 is awesome. Now we got a lot more punch in the clouds. If I deactivate this whole thing, you can see that there wasn't too much punch there, but there was a good amount. So we want to keep that as much as we can and even accentuate it if we can. And I'm actually going to do one more thing to make this pop out a little bit more. And from here, just because the qualifier and the power window work so well together, we can just leave that there and move on. And hit off the highlight button and hit Alt-S. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to the power windows. I'm going to make another qualifier. I'm going to grab just the sky. Hit the qualifier button. Raise it. We'll go to the highlights. Raise this just to see an even higher spectrum of highlights. Maybe right there. Then the L soft. I love it. And then the clean black, I'll raise just a tiny bit. Maybe a little more soft. Maybe raise it a little more. That looks good. And then if I come in here and look at these clouds, and then back to the primaries bars, if I move this gain up, you see a little bit more punch there. A little bit more punch in those highlights. Just giving us a little bit more contrast, a little bit more depth of the clouds. If I deactivate, activate, deactivate, activate, that's a really, really cool and powerful tool that you can use in a lot of cool ways. I'm just going to grab a little higher on the spectrum here. Yeah. And boom. I like it. It doesn't make a difference on all the clouds, but it definitely gives us more depth between, you know, the shadow, the lowest point of the clouds and the highest highs. And I like that. That's really nice. Giving our whole image more depth. If I take away those two last nodes, we've really done wonders to the clouds. And there wasn't much sky in the shot anyway, but, you know, you might as well make the sky pop if you can. So if I hit Alt-S to add one more node, we are going to give this a little bit more softness. One thing that's kind of a dead giveaway with modern kind of cheaper drones like the Mavic 2 Pro, it's a great drone, but it's got this digital video sharpness that's just not right. It's almost similar to what you'd see out of a cell phone camera. It's something that very small sensors have. Just small sensors, they can only input so much data. So the sharpness tends to be digitalized and kind of fake. And so in this last node, if we go to the mid-tone details and just pull this down, at about 30, 42, that's okay. It adds the softness that seems a lot more film-esque than, you know, than the drone would naturally give us. I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, 2 more things, maybe 3 more things. I always say 1 more thing, and then I do like 5 more things. So I'm sorry about that. You know, it's just how my brain works. So if I hit Alt-S and make another new node, I'm going to go into the HDR wheels. Now, the HDR wheels are super cool. You have a lot of spectrums here from black, dark, shadow, light, and then highlight, and then you have specular. So you have a lot of different ranges in there. And if you click the highlight button and then kind of pan this light spectrum on the side, you can see what spectrum of light you're affecting, which is really, really cool. It makes it a really, really powerful tool to use when it comes to customizing and making your own looks. And so if I bump this up to, let's say, about here, I like that. Maybe about right there. And maybe a little lower. And then in the light spectrum. Move this up just a little bit, maybe right there. I'm going to hit off the highlight button and then push a little bit of warmth into those highlights. I know it looks crazy, but then I'm going to come to this highlight wheel, move this back to the blue to bring us back to our whites being white. And this will also give us a little bit more of a sunset-ish look, a little bit more of a warm film-esque look. And that'll come out down here to the shadows, and I'll actually push a little bit of blue into the shadows, a little bit of teal. A little teal, a little greenish. Yeah, that looks really good. Then I'll come over to the key, go down to the gain, and double click this, and then I'm going to push in, I'm going to minus this and cut this about in half. I'm going to go to 0.650. And now we have a little bit more color, a little bit more warmth, but it doesn't look unnatural. It doesn't look really even noticeable at all. If we full screen this, that looks a lot nicer. That looks really good. And I'm noticing a little bit of noise, which of course we can come and denoise this. I would always denoise as my first node, by the way. So if you need to denoise, definitely do it with your first node before you start going to ham on the color grade. So I'll come down to the temporal noise reduction. I'm going to go to 3 frames. I'll just go to faster for today and then bump this up to maybe 4.8. And then I'm going to come over to the spectral noise reduction and unlock our luma and chroma and just bump up our chroma noise reduction a bit. Yeah, and that looks good. Of course, now it doesn't want to play back very smoothly, but our noise is looking a lot better. If I cut this in half. Yeah. Noise is looking a lot better. Awesome. So I'm going to come back to the Edit tab. And now that we have a really nice color grade, I'm going to do one more thing to this clip, and I'm going to add a glow. You can do this in the Color tab on a new node, or you can do this in the Edit tab. Either one works just fine. And I'll go to the effects of the glow, come down to soft light, move the shine threshold all the way down, and then from the opacity, I'm going to start the opacity at 0 and crank it up just a little bit to where I can notice it. And that's it. I don't like a lot of this glow, just a little bit, just to make it pop a little bit more. And that looks good. Now, the last thing I'm going to do to really give this a cinematic look is some lens flares. Now, I've got a couple here that they aren't the right color, but I like their style. This one kind of flares out here and kind of spins around, which is really cool. So if we click this, go to the inspector, click the composite mode, which would be under composite mode, and then go to screen. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, this is just a little way to give your image a little bit more flare, but one thing I'm going to do is instead of that flare happening in the bottom of the screen, I'm going to flip it upside down because the sun should be coming from over here, casting this way to the right. Nice. I like that. Now, it's a little crazy because it's blue, and it shouldn't be because the sun isn't blue. So we can come over to the Color tab and then make sure we have that lens flare selected, and then we can just change the temperature to warm. And let me go back to full resolution. Oh, yeah. That's cool. Still overdone, but that's an easy fix. We're going to come over here to the opacity. I'm just going to make this 25. I don't want it to be that strong. I barely even want it to be noticeable. See a little highlight, and then it goes away. I love it. Maybe we can bump that up to 30. But one thing I'm going to do is add one more. I have this other one that's pretty cool. It's just this little flickering. So I'll move this onto the clip, go back to our composite mode, and turn this to screen. And this is happening at the bottom of the screen. It should be happening where the sun's coming from. So I'm going to flip this upside down. And then one thing I'm going to do is, let me solo this. I'm going to move this up so it's really coming from this corner. Boom. And you know what? Over time, I'm going to fade it out as well. So I'm actually going to make this fade happen throughout this entire clip. It just fades. Because I kind of want this lens flare to start peeking in, and then this one comes. And so we'll need to do the same thing we did with this one that we did with the last one. So with that one selected, we'll need to change the temperature to something more warm. Right here in that corner. Boom. And I'll actually cut this first one back down to actually 20. I'm not that impressed with that one. Awesome. And that's how you make a drone shot cinematic. So if you like this video, definitely make sure to go down there and click that like button. And if you didn't like this video, I don't know, maybe leave a comment. I'm trying. And of course, feel free to subscribe if you like videos on Davinci Resolve. And as always, I'm Marcel, and this has been a Modern Filmmaker. I'll see you all next time. Peace.